In 1870, Kirkwood, Missouri was a young city of about 1,200 inhabitants. Mostly residential, it boasted a growing commercial district and several schools and churches. But a small number of residents were longing for a church of their own, as there wasn't a Baptist church in Kirkwood. In fact, there were no Baptist churches or ministers within 6 miles of the city. In July of 1870, Dr. Benjamin Edwards of Kirkwood had as his house guest the Reverend John Downer, who was an American Baptist missionary from Abilene, Kansas. The two men called upon Mrs. M.W. Leet, and in the course of conversation discussed the possibility of organizing a Baptist church in Kirkwood. They resolved to visit all the known Baptists in the area to see if they were favorable to the idea. Those interested were invited to a meeting on Sunday, July 31st, 1870. On that day, a group of 14 met together and pledged themselves to create a new church called the First Baptist Church of Kirkwood, Missouri, adopting the Articles of Faith as published by the American Baptist Publication Society. Reverend Downer was asked to become the first minister of the church. Writing to the board of the American Baptist Home Mission Society, he stated, "On the last Sunday of July, a church was organized with great unanimity and heartiness." The first years were difficult for the new church. Meeting in a rented hall in downtown Kirkwood, the small congregation struggled financially and often could not support a pastor. Through the generosity of notable St. Louis businessman and fellow Baptist William M. McPherson, a lot was secured in northern Kirkwood. The property was located on the southwestern corner of the intersection of Washington Avenue and Webster Avenue, which would later be renamed Kirkwood Road. In 1874, during the pastorate of Reverend E.H. Sawyer, the church was able to find the means to erect a small brick building. In the closing decades of the 1800s, the young church began to flourish. A Ladies' Aid Society was formed, followed by the organization of the Young People's Society. The church started a mission Sunday school in South Kirkwood called the Rose Hill Mission, which they supported for more than 10 years. Colonel E.A. Haight, an early deacon and trustee of the church, greatly increased church attendance during this time as he and his wife would march members of their Kirkwood Military Academy through the streets of Kirkwood to church services twice every Sunday. Reverend Sawyer returned to pastor the church in 1892, and during his second term of service, great strides were made in the church's life. More than 100 members were added to the church during this time, and the church became self-sufficient. The small brick church building could no longer meet the needs of the growing congregation, and in 1894, the dreams became reality as the new church building was completed, replacing the old building at the same North Kirkwood location. In 1898, the church voted to change its name to the Wetzel Memorial Baptist Church. This was in honor of Mrs. Mary Wetzel, who shortly before her death had given generously towards completing and furnishing the new church building. The church continued to grow and prosper in the new century despite periods of war and financial depression. The men of the church were increasingly involved in both the laymen's missionary movement and the Men and Religion Forward movement. An active women's missionary society was organized. Diabetes Aid Society continued to serve and had an active role in helping others in the community during the Great Depression. In the late 1930s, the church focused on evangelism, with church members conducting personal evangelism visits door to door in Kirkwood, followed by week-long revival meetings complete with special music by the church choir and orchestra. The word in Kirkwood was that when the Baptists started singing, you could hear them all the way to the Methodist Church. The church membership more than doubled during this time. The years during World War II were difficult for the church, as there were 82 church members in the armed forces. Those remaining at home still continued on the work of the church. Vacation Bible School and revivals were held on a yearly basis. There was growing attendance in all church programs, including the Brotherhood, Women's Missionary Union, the Baptist Training Union, Girls Auxiliary, and the Royal Ambassadors. Until the late 1940s, the congregation primarily reflected the needs and outlook of those who lived in Kirkwood. The growth of the metropolitan St. Louis area dictated that the church minister to more than the confined area of its immediate suburb. In 1947, unable to expand to meet the needs of the growing church at the existing location, a new property was purchased on the corner of Woodlawn and Adams in eastern Kirkwood. This was the site of the Woodlawn Hotel, which had been originally built to accommodate visitors to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. The church met in the hotel building while constructing a new auditorium for worship next door. Along with adopting a new location, the church once more chose a new name, the Kirkwood Baptist Church. In the early 1950s, the church moved forward with its dream of a larger space, more suitable for its programs and activities than the old hotel. In 1954, a new educational building was built, which would be the foundation for several additional structures and updates over the next 30 years. Beginning in this decade, there was a dramatic increase in the support of missions by the church, both financially and in the involvement of the church members in many new mission endeavors. At long last, the old hotel was finally torn down, and a beautiful new sanctuary was completed and dedicated to the glory of God in July of 1959. More than 50 years have passed since the cross was raised on the new steeple, and during that time, Kirkwood Baptist Church has strived to be the presence of Jesus Christ in a rapidly changing world. Building on our heritage, we have continued to cherish the centrality of preaching and worship, the freedom and responsibility of each person to respond to the call of God, the full participation of all people, laity and clergy, women and men, older and younger, in the service to Christ, and that all are encouraged to exercise God's gifts and calling in active ways. Could the 14 that joined together on that July day in 1870 ever imagine the thousands that would follow their example and join with them as members of this extraordinary family of faith? That their vision of a Baptist church for their small city would result in a church whose impact and influence has reached far beyond the boundaries of Kirkwood, Missouri. And 140 years later, their church, still following in a long tradition of warm and willing faithfulness to the gospel, would be looking back in gratitude while continuing to dream dreams of future service to Christ.